Good afternoon, and welcome to Everybody, the podcast which shares stories that highlight people in life that make the world an interesting place, which ultimately ties us all together in unique and wonderful ways. And who am I, you might ask? I would be the head wrap socialite, wife, mom, micro-influencer in the fashion and etiquette world. But on this podcast, I will be introducing you to some people who I've had the opportunity to meet along my journey, who have helped enrich me in my life in beautiful ways, and who I hope will do the same in yours.
Strength that we have from children. Now, as adults, we can think about, well, because it's important, so when they grow up, that's where it comes in, that spiritual, mystical, practical, but it's reality.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the energy and effort that people make to capture the minds of the youth.
Yeah.
But they're powerful in itself. There is actually a cute story. We're talking about the youth, what the youth can impact. I'll tell you about my daughter, who's presently in Israel. So as a young girl, 2 years old, so we have a guest that lives in Rochester, and he came over for the Sabbath. So she's going to entertain the guest while we're finishing getting ready. So he had just gotten his car refinished.
Okay.
New paint job.
Mm-hmm.
And my 2-year-old, he says, is that your car? And he says, yeah. He thought she's admiring the paint job and whatever. And she says, you shouldn't drive on Shabbos. And he looks around. Where's the adults?
Mm-hmm.
She nobody told her to say that. And she's not doing it in, you're a terrible person.
Right.
She's just saying, here's the fact.
For sure.
And it struck him. Like you said, children get it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it is.
Right.
Because of this gentleman actually eventually moved close by so he wouldn't have to drive on the Sabbath. He was open to hear it.
That's it.
The challenge we have very often with raising our children, we're not an insular place, and for sure, and many of my colleagues, wherever they are, the deeper lessons, the teaching of care and compassion, and it's about your response to be able to encourage a person and give them the opportunity to observe,
For sure.
to be who they really are. That's it. You see, that goes to the mystical aspect. It's helpful to read the get-go, the scripture in the beginning. We are really good. I know there's other religious faiths that think a little bit differently or very differently, but I'm just that's our modus operandi. That's how we do.
Good afternoon. On today's episode, we have an extraordinary guest who has dedicated his life to faith, community, and healing. Rabbi Greene's journey is as fascinating as it is inspiring. Born and raised in the vibrant city of Minneapolis, he comes from a rich academic lineage, with his father teaching at the Graduate School for Public Health at the University of Minnesota. David's educational path was equally exceptional. He attended the very first Orthodox Jewish parochial school in Minnesota, setting the stage for what I would say an incredible journey. My family and I have known Rabbi Greene and his family for over 15 years, and I'm excited to have him on today's episode. Welcome, Rabbi Greene.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you for being here. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are?
So I was born in Minneapolis, and actually point out that my great-grandparents are interred in the Minneapolis Jewish Cemetery. So that makes me come from a line of long-suffering Vikings fans. That's something true. Although I can't say anything about Gophers, because from when I was young, my parents became more observant. And so I never would engaged with college sports because we were observing the Sabbath. So the television was off on Sabbath. And so never got a taste. So never got hungry. Yeah, so I grew up in Golden Valley. Great friends in the neighborhood, and there was the closest friends were a family. They were not Jewish.
Okay.
So the father was actually our family doctor. So when I would go over to the house on the Sabbath to play, the father would be sitting watching the college football, and he would chase me out, saying, "This is not for you. Go. You should be playing with the kids. It's this is not for you." So growing up, chased to the room where the Christmas tree was it's okay,
Right.
but it's not. It's the Sabbath. This is not what you do. But it was so. I definitely enjoyed sports. Definitely played it. But never engaged in organized sports.
Okay.
So I grew up at 15, after going through the Torah Academy, the Jewish parochial school. I was sent to the Lubavitch Yeshiva, which is in Canada, in Quebec. And since it was in Quebec, it was Collège Rabbinique du Canada, which is Rabbinical College of Canada. So I matriculated there in Canadian history. That was a tough year because it's not that interesting. But it's interesting to learn history from a different perspective.
For sure. Now, was it taught in French or was it taught?
Thank God. I was one class ahead of that rule being applied in the school system. Because the class below me had to learn their secular subjects en français. But anyway, the word yeshiva it's the word for high school. It was a high school, and it continued to post-high school studies, and eventually the college portion, learning rabbinic ordination. The community in Quebec, in Montreal specifically, is an old Jewish community, and at the same time was a vibrant Jewish community. Right. So the influx of meeting different people from different backgrounds, and not necessarily, I'm going to say, in my classes, but the Lubavitch, which is a name of a town in White Russia, where the leaders of the Chabad school of philosophy, of Hasidic philosophy, were the Rebbes, the leaders of the movement, headquartered for 200 years.
Wow.
So hence it's the name of the organization that we have is Chabad Lubavitch. So Chabad is 3 words in Hebrew: Chochma, Bina, Das. Knowledge, wisdom, understanding. The Chabad movement which was founded by Reb Shner Zalman of Liadi, incorporated a systematic understanding. It's not just all heart. It's, I got to use brain and to use the mind to devote and dedicate how and direct. So I was sent to that institution.
Would you mind sharing with the listeners how you know that you were going to be a rabbi?
Here's the personal story. So after finishing high school and continuing on studies, I think the teacher I had, I eventually found he's a great teacher for other things, but I just was, where am I going? Where is this going? It's quote unquote the system. So my parents sent me over there, so I continued. So the perpetual motion kind of starts to slow down. Where am I now? And a lot of my friends are going on, so who am I? Where am I going with this? They transferred to other places because they were sent. I have a lot of contemporaries in my class that were sent to study in Caracas for a couple of years. But I was in Montreal, and eventually I turned to my teacher that taught me in 10th and 11th grade, and I just asked him a question. I said, where am I at with that? What does he think? And he said, he says, what's wrong? You don't have to make a career out of this. There's plenty of people that are good Jews. They're fine and dandy. They're wonderful. And he wasn't doing the psychological analysis. What is making you think this, that you have to do this? You don't have to. You don't have to put that on yourself. However, I do recommend that you don't leave until you have that piece of paper. Because then you will feel good about all the time you spent. And and maybe have to put a diploma on the wall. Mm-hmm. So I said, you know what? Sounds good. So I got into the program of learning. And then once I started doing that, I said there was a couple of things that came at the same time. To be able, first of all, learning for a goal completely changed things for me. They say in Yiddish, with both feet. Mm. And once you're doing this, there's another factor that in this movement, in this system that I was in, they do not give you a test. There's a number of tests that you have to go through of different subjects as you go through them. You're not permitted to take a test unless you have a signed permission slip from what's called the mashpia in yeshiva. The mashpia of yeshiva is the spiritual counselor. Okay. So once I started attending, once I started, I came and going to attend, but I realized I better do something with this time. Right. So I went and worked with some others and developed a curriculum of what I'm going to learn in Hasidic. So I learned with a guy. He's a young man. He's now a elementary school teacher in Los Angeles, and he used to say, "My mother loves you." I said, "Why is your mother?" Because I would call the house early in the morning and say, "When his name is Yerachmiel," I say, "Did you wake up Yerachmiel?" She says, "I said, tell him I'm expecting him here in 10 minutes." Mm-hmm. I'm here. Right. Because he was going to go through this curriculum. We were just going to accomplish. And when you start gaining information, that's the second paragraph of the Shema, which is the prayer that's recited twice daily by Jews. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. There's a couple other paragraphs. In the second paragraph, it says, "And you shall place these words upon." So that's right, on your hearts, on you plural hearts. You plural. How's this? Y'all should place these words on y'all hearts. I think that's where it works. It sounds better than you plural. Anyway, so the question is, it's not about, you can't do anything to the heart. All you can do is place the words on the heart. And from time to time, the heart opens up and some of these words fall in. Our job is keep on information. Not like that Charlie Brown thing. They put the book under my pillow and it'll seep in. It's real info. You have to learn it. You have to read it. You have to review it. You have to look at it. And as time and at the same time very much got involved with that, going to people's businesses in Montreal on Friday. And there was a statement from one of the Chabad leaders that when you do this type of work, it improves your ability to understand 1,000 times. Wow. The story back. So these gentlemen would come and visit them on a weekly basis. So they would come on the weekend. So one of these guys, I'm fast friends with him now till this day. While he was here, I said, there's somebody I'm going to go visit somebody in the hospital. And he says, "Can I come with you?" It was good old days. I said, "Sure, why not?" So this is a guy. No matter how you see, if on the Sabbath I wear a longer coat, it's the formal coat. I wear a fedora. This guy in that Hasidic group, they wear the fur hat, and they look like, I call them motorcycle boots. Okay. They look like motorcycle cops have these leather boots that go up. That is their style of dress, plus a long coat. Okay. So sure, let's go. I walk in. So we come up. Of course, it's a little colder. So we go in to the closest entrance to where we live is in Damatilla. Okay. So we go up, and we're going to be walking down the hallway down the Damatilla. Okay. So walk with me. Fine. I usually start to get, I'm going to say game face on. I'm start thinking, okay, get my mind, just to center myself before I go see this person. So this guy, every single person in the hallway, he said, "Hello, how are you? Nice to see you. Hello." A nurse is at the same, and every nurse was, "Hi, nice, hello." How are you doing? Very nice. Thank you very much for asking. Da, da, da. Every single person. I realized at that moment, there's an aspect. He's doing what's called receiving every person with a cheerful countenance, which is a statement in the Talmud. You should receive or greet or meet or encounter every person with a cheerful countenance. And he was doing it. He was living it. Me, the person that sees these people, and the person that's going to do this. That is the frequency that he exists at. He doesn't. What he does in his community himself is phenomenal. I know the other things he does. He's involved with the burial society. So most of the people he's dealing with are not even alive. Many people he deals with are not alive anymore. I said, note to self, wow. I'm not just going to be impressed. I want to incorporate it. I want to do it. I got to get out of my introvert self and be present. And but what about me?
Yeah.
But you know what? You'll be okay, because it's a little bit self-talk of, right. You're okay. You're good. You got it. Here's an opportunity. Do it.
Right. And that's it. It's like taking, like you said, just taking that opportunity and making, I always go back to it, makes yourself a better version of yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's taking that opportunity to be a little bit better in this moment. And if there's one thing, I think that children, it's going back to little children, they are so innocent. They are so free. They will bring you such joy because they're able to live in the moment. And sometimes I have a question, and maybe you can answer this question. And maybe I've asked this question of you before, but when do we lose that ability? Because I know when we're younger, we have that ability to move through space being so free. And at some point, it seems like it stops. And then we're kind of guarded. And then later on, it feels like we're able to move through that space a little bit more freer. But there's a huge span of time where it stops, or at least for me, it has stopped. And I'm like, when did I lose that?
I've listened to some lectures about this type of stuff, and I have colleagues that are very good at analyzing this. I'm curious to know as well. And as you bring it up, that's a great question. Mm-hmm. It is a question. And I remember a lecture that it says when kids get upset, and they get upset, and then you say make up, and they can 5 minutes later they're getting along. But adults tell them make up, and it's not going to happen, mm-hmm. because he used the example. He says because children would rather be happy than be right. Mm. So when did we stop becoming more important that we're right than we're happy? So that's what I think. I'm using that as a parameter. So it's the same question. I haven't answered your question per se, but it's like I've assigned different value of a decision subconsciously somewhere. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's interesting, and probably different people. I'm sure child psychologists would be able to say when the kids do that, mm-hmm. from observation. Right. But that kid is always within us. So we can always tap into it. Mm. We can always tap into our innocence, our curiosity, and it's that's when our ego gets in the way.
Yeah.
So I was speaking to a colleague, and he was pointing out that, he was saying some of your problem is that you don't realize that you're okay. Therefore, you super inflate yourself, and now you're more sensitive.
Right. Wow.
I've been reflecting on it this morning, because they just told to me this morning, because they're talking about why and how making decisions. Yeah. It says it's an interesting phenomena that when do we realize we're okay? We're okay. You want to improve? I mean, it's a whole thing about the harshest critic that we had. I once I told my father, My father and my mother were visiting. So I said, I realized I'm my own harshest critic. And my father said, it was beautiful. He says, yes, I used to believe and understand that about myself as well. And then I married your mother. My mother was there and she says, yes, you weren't doing a good enough job. I said, I discovered perpetual motion. Sure. But it's not, sure. But we do have, that is a question. Why don't we have a inner voice that says, you're good.
You're okay.
We have an inner voice saying, but from what I understand, from the understanding, the Hasidic learning that I have, it's because there's the statement from the previous Rebbe in a Hasidic discourse. He says, all problems come from ego. All problems. So ego, there's healthy, I mean, I'm not talking about Freud, but I'm just using that word. Yeah. But the idea for me initially was like, well, what about a person with an inferiority complex? How does that come from ego? So thinking and analyzing and discussing came out with the following, that a person, an inferiority complex, what they're really saying to themselves is, really, I should be so much better. Who says you'll be? That's really ego. You should be so much better. How about being who you are? You have an image of yourself that should be so much better. So you think you're a failure. But why do you think you're a failure? It's coming from that self-perception of yourself as me better. This is not satisfying. It is, but this is where the again, it's like, why did God create us with such machinations? See, that's the deeper question. So what'd you want? God, what'd you want? He says, I've put in within you. You see, that's where it comes in the idea of the original sin in Judaism, eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So then we were no longer subjective. No, we're no longer objective. Thank you. We're it's all subjective. We're all involved. It's all internal. And so good luck. So look, but then again, don't the psychologists and therapists and psychiatrists deserve to make a living?
I guess they do too.
They do.
They do. Yeah. I always say we're brothers and sisters in this wonderful world and called life. We're brothers and sisters, and we're called to be that towards one another, every single day. Even if I don't know you per se, I do know you because we're all one of the same spirit.
Well, divine providence, God felt it's pretty good reason for us to be encountering one another.
Ask you this question. I know that your work, you provide emotional support, you provide religious support, but you also provide like a healing. And I had mentioned that earlier in the beginning. And I know last week was the end of the high holidays, Sukkot. How does one celebrate the high holiday in the midst of all of the tragic?
I like to, I don't know. I don't know if we celebrated. I don't know if we grieved. People were saying, some people says, unbelievable. One of the things that got me through it, because we started hearing the news on the day that we're celebrating. So I had read a story in preparation for one of the marks at one of the events, part of the rituals at the end of the holiday is what's called Yizkor. Yizkor means remembrance. We talk about, we recite a prayer. Every individual does this and talks about asking God to remember of the people, our parents that have passed on, and we actually commit to give charity in their memory. I mean, they're no longer able to give charity, so we do something, and it's a benefit to that soul, and it's attributed to that soul that something happened in this physical world. Remember, keep on emphasizing that. Okay, so I had a story which I didn't say, but it came up useful later, because the story was as follows: that there was a group, you see, towards the end of World War II in 1944, the transports of Jews to Auschwitz was coming a lot from Hungary. I think 500,000 Jews from Hungary were sent to Auschwitz to die, and they died. As they would say, you know, the only way out from Auschwitz was through the chimneys. So, and it was later, because at first they had their own organization when the Nazis took over the government. The details, I don't remember the history per se. So they came along, this group of teenage boys, and they were brought in. But when they came to Auschwitz, they were sent into the camp. They were not immediately killed. And they were there a few weeks. Then came a selection. And all this group of boys were taken to be able to the gas chambers to die. I think it was, I didn't even look up the date to be sure. I think it was October 9th, because this is recorded in people's diaries. So October 9th, 1944. So it was the same holiday. It was the same holiday. So they were brought in they were taken, and they knew by that time. They weren't in the shock position of where it's going on. They already knew. They're there a couple of weeks. They know. Like they were told that. So they were brought into the gas chamber, and one of the guys, before they were going to put down the Zyklon B, which turned into the gas, they were told, one of the guys said, Chevra, means guys, tonight is Simchas Torah. We do not, the rejoicing with the Torah, that's the holiday. We do not have a Torah with which to celebrate, but we have our souls. So let's dance. That's because that's what we do. That's a holiday, and that's what Jews do. So they actually, they say they know the songs that they sang, and they're singing and they're dancing. So before they poured in, the Nazis hear singing coming out of the gas chamber. And that's not what the usual sound is. You know, can imagine, the usual sounds are screams, whimpering, anguish, and they hear sounds of rejoicing. They open it up and say, what's going on here? So the guy that called everyone to pray, to dance, said, we are celebrating the fact that we're leaving this world, which is run by vicious humans like you, and we're going to be reunited with our parents that you murdered. The Nazi said, it's not enough to kill you. We're going to take you out, and we're going to torture you to death tomorrow. So they took them all out. The news came across within the system. There was a commandant of an armaments factory right nearby, and he needed workers. He heard about these guys. He came and he took them. I need them to work. So he commandeered this group. He needed slave labor, so he took them. So this group survived. So when you see, what do we do when we're faced with this? How do we rejoice? Rejoice, we have no choice. I have nephews in the army, in the Israeli Defense Forces, and videos coming back. They're asking people, because it lifts their morale. You could say, it lifts their morale? Yeah, they're facing difficult things. My niece, my sister's daughter's husband's brother, my sister's daughter's brother-in-law was at that festival, the music festival, to celebrate. He died saving others. How did he save others? I listened to the interview. It took a few days to identify his body, but he kept everybody calm. And he was directing them to safety. There were thousands, you hear 250 at that place. There were hundreds to direct people to escape, to hide. So the story is, what more could he want than people should celebrate life? That's the type of person he was, because that's how he gave up his life. I hope I haven't rationalized a thing, because God needs a good lawyer, and I'm not going to be it for him.
For sure.
But I'm going to say, at the same time, people want to know. I mean, I get provocative when I say, when you ask where was God? I say, God was there 100%. God was giving those monsters freedom of choice, and they chose not wisely. Is that understatement? They chose rudely. I mean, what words can we use?
Right.
And people like my niece's brother-in-law chose very wisely.
Right.
And so that's all and we tap into this because it's all about the moment. The moment God says, we are Jews and we're going to celebrate because we have a gift. What? The alternative is to say, I don't want to be? What kind of, I don't? Not for the world. There was a story with a young man that would go to the story that there was a guy there was a gentleman. He was speaking at a fundraiser thing for a Jewish organization. They asked him, what was his story they brought him here? He says, I'll tell you, it was a boy that would come, a Lubavitcher boy that would come to my business every week. What happened? He would ask me to come to my office and ask me to put on film. And I said, no. Every week he came. I said, no. Every week. Finally, I take to him, I says, how does it feel to be a failure? And the kid says, what do you mean failure? He says, you come here and ask me to do something, it never happens. I says, you don't get it. You just don't get it. That's not a failure. I'm not a failure. I'm not failing at all. Right. I come every week to let you know that I love you. Mission accomplished.
Infuse everything with love.
Right. And that's, but we'll tell you this, infused with love. I do like my favorite Catholic, JFK, forgive your enemies, but don't forget their names. Is therefore the love. I would say other people may feel differently. For me, it's not about revenge. It's about doing the right thing.
So, thank you, for your insight, and thank you for sharing. I know as a mom, when I heard, the stories start to come in and things on the news, I felt, a certain way, heartbroken. I think about, my husband. I thought about you and your family. I thought about people that I went to high school with. The high school I went to was predominantly a Jewish, community. I thought about Jay's grandparents. And like I said, as a mom, to hear the stories come in, how terrorists came and did awful things, my heart broke, and it still breaks. Because as a mom, you see things from a different perspective. And like the overarching theme, like even on our talk, it's like, what is your calling? Like if you don't do everything for love, what are you doing it for?
It pains me to see that humanity has even stooped to this. It's a blight on all of us.
Yeah.
But the only way to combat darkness is with light. You can't use the expression is, you can't use rags and brooms are not going to get rid of darkness. So taking care of the dark, removing the cancer is going to take surgical tools. That's for sure. I like, it's kind of, I like the idea. You don't have to spill blood if you just turn off the water. But the story is in our lives, our response here in Rochester is we are building. We're going to build more. It's going to be to make more opportunities to support people that are seeking health. Because that's what we got to,
for sure.
We both talk about football. I'm going to stay in my lane. Because when you leave your lane, that's when you miss your assignment, your blocking assignment. That's what I think that happened very often, a lot of times even though they won, for the Vikings, if you heard, so I was listening to they were talking about their assignments missed because everybody has to do their assignment
for sure.
And our assignment, we have a list. We know what we want. We know what we want to do, and to be able to build, to be able to another look. This morning, our meeting at Chabad was about who's in town, okay, so update the list because people got left town. So we're going to focus on this way we're not distracted.
Right.
Because we're going to focus our energies. There's people that are coming to town, and people need kosher food, and people and things about places to stay, and people and anticipating, and how we're communicating with that, and then you have other events. We're going to be having an event, and we're going to be having Hanukkah's coming up, and we have people to speak to because that's also bringing in more light. And then and at the same time, and then we actually have a building campaign that we're working on, and we have fundraising that we have to do, and people have other things, and so. We have to, that's about doing and bringing in more light. And that's sticking with our assignment.
Right.
And as if they call me up and they want my advice, I'll give what do I know? But I'll give of course. But until I get that phone call, I have my assignment.
For sure.
And I have what we need to do. And we get distracted, and when you hear such a news, and hearing the news and it irks us, and it to the core. And there's a balance also with that, because if it makes us depressed, down, and always remember, they broadcast it. So by consuming what they broadcast, you're doing what they want, and I don't want to do anything that they want.
Right. That's a good point.
Oh, they have people have arguments. I've heard the arguments. They say, "Well, you should know to understand." I said, "Good, you're an exception."
Right.
Good for you.
For sure.
But I would say, as a general, so good. You're not going to get cancer if you smoke. Mazel tov. Yeah. But we suggest people don't.
Yeah.
Because the statistics show that it's harmful for your health.
For sure. I really appreciate, your perspective. I really appreciate your voice. You've given, I feel, a lot of clarity and peace to the conversation. And this is given not only for myself, I know for the listeners who will listen to this podcast, more food for thought. Just different things that we can do within our daily life to be more light, be light, live in love, to do our part, and whatever that part is, like you said, helping that person, at the supermarket or holding that door, but whatever our part is in this big thing called life, only God knows. And we have to get up every day and put one foot in front of the other.
Absolutely.
Knowing that hopefully we are contributing to the better good, not of something else.
But if a person's looking for an opportunity, I would say waking up in the morning is an opportunity.
Amen.
To say, thank you, God. And that's just, and I say doing it, not just thinking it,
right.
Articulating it. Don't have to look in the mirror while you're doing it. but just saying thank you, God. And I submit that'll be a centering moment and a calibrating moment towards recognizing all the rest of your day you'll be purposeful if we start with thanks for God.
You have a way, again, of just having beautiful conversation in a way that is not only meaningful, but enlightening, and in terms that I can understand, and it will help me move better in the world. And dear listeners, you can see why Rabbi Greene and his family really means so much to my family, to my journey, to my husband's journey, to my kids' journey. It's this level of conversation that he engages us on and challenges us to think about the world differently. So I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you. And lots of success, happiness, and all the blessings for you, your family, and all your listeners.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi Greene.